7:43, let's see what's in the papers and what they make of everything that's been going on, of course, overnight. Former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and political commentator Andy Williams. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning.
Are you in a state of shock, Charlie, or were you expecting this?
I'm never in a state of shock. I'm always bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, optimistic about the future of this country and
what about the future of the party?
and the future of the party. I'm always optimistic because, look, obviously, if you crunch the numbers in terms of the swings, in terms of the history of who's held onto the seats before, it's obviously been a difficult night for the Conservatives. That's what everybody's saying. But I just hold on to the fact that the turnout was so low. I genuinely do not believe you can take, with absolute certainty, and I don't actually believe that you'll find a pollster or anyone that will come onto this channel to say with absolute certainty that they will know what is going to happen at the next general election just on the back of these two by-elections. So I think that's just fair, because anything can happen. There's a long way to go. The Prime Minister will have to respond to this. And when it comes to a general election and people are thinking about the national issues, not the circumstances in which those by-elections were called, I think it could be a different picture.
Is that fair to say, Andy? Or do you think you can't deny the rise of reform and how well Labour did last night?
Yeah, look, undoubtedly in Kingswood and in Wellingborough, the voters have taken the opportunity to give the government a kicking, as they often do in by-elections. But let's remember that it's less than 3 years since the Conservatives won a by-election in Hartlepool that was held by Labour. Things have gone very south very quickly for the Conservatives, and I do think that what we saw last night will be replicated at the general election. I think it's absolutely reflective of a feeling that the current government are finished.
Run out of steam, Charlie.
The Tories won Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
Yeah, but again,
they held.
That was the by-election as well. That was the
and in these by-elections.
That was a by-election. That was Boris Johnson's seat. I mean, that should be straightforward. The former Prime Minister's seat, they held.
Well, it's just another by-election. Just pointing out the facts. There's another by-election that's going
to the government. You can't pick and choose, Andy.
But I accept that. Look, it's been an interesting night for the Conservatives. But I think, look, what the Prime Minister will want to do is to say how difficult it is, to move the dial on, to talk about the national issues, to talk about tax cuts that might be coming in the budget in a couple of weeks' time. They'll be talking about.
I thought they're not coming, are they?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because it's on the front of the Daily Mail this morning, Andy. Be bold and go for big tax cuts. That's what the Mail is telling the Chancellor.
That's what the Mail's telling the Chancellor.
Will it make any difference?
Well, I don't even know whether it's going to happen, because we're now in recession, and the Chancellor has received news that they don't have as much, inverted commas, fiscal headroom as they thought they might have, so it might not be affordable. I mean, are we really in a position to cut income tax by 2%?
But do we have to... In terms of the recession, technical recession, it's basically flat. It was basically the end of last year that we're talking about those figures, and the PMIs, we understand, for January are looking pretty healthy. So we might actually technically be out of a recession already.
Let's see. But, I mean, a recession is a recession, and I think the more important point, that's looking at 6 months, and I agree, it's a snapshot, it's very short term. What is more important is that we're looking at longer than 14 years of absolutely flat growth, no growth in the economy. I think the economic performance has been dreadful, and that is another reason why people are fed up with the government, because people feel poorer, the cost of living is sky high, and it's famously people vote with their wallets, and people don't feel comfortable in the way that people would expect to after 14 years of Conservative government.
And Charlie, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage both saying similar things overnight, that the Conservative Party's got so far away from its Conservative values that it's actually isolating its traditional voter base. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think two things. The first is, I know, two things, one. You'll be surprised to hear. Two things, I think, look, what the Conservative Party is very good at, and what Conservative governments have been very good at, is, I think, adapting. So, when there are situations and crises that the country faces, the Conservative Party knows how to evolve and knows how to adapt and knows how to face those issues. So when it came to COVID, obviously, huge amounts had to be spent to protect people's lives and people's livelihoods. The furlough scheme, things that the Chancellor did, the Prime Minister did when he was Chancellor, I think are broadly things that the public can get behind. Now, people recognise you've got to pay for that somehow. So the tax burden has been high. That is not something that the Conservatives, general Conservatives, or it's not a Conservative principle to have high taxes, but we've had to have it because of the circumstances of which came about.
All right, the circumstances for the government have been tough. There's no doubt, because obviously when they came into power, and we were not far from not long after the subprime mortgage crash and all the problems that created. So we had austerity, and it's gone from slightly coming out of that to then COVID and all the rest of it. So they've had a tough time. But that's neither here nor there, is it? When it comes to how people are feeling. Actually, it might have been a tough time, but they still want to feel better.
Well, they do, and that's why I think there will be room for tax cuts at the budget. I think the Chancellor will be able to say, look, yes, it has been a difficult time. Getting inflation down, which is effectively a tax on people's day-to-day spending. Food bills are increased. Other spending commitments are obviously increased because of inflation. So getting that down to allow people to get back to a normal state of sort of spending is absolutely key. That means that the economy has had to cool, and that's why interest rates have, through the Bank of England, have remained high to cool the economy, to bring inflation down, to bring those prices down, which means that people might not have invested, people might not have spent, the economy might not have grown in those 3 months at the back end of last year. Now we're seeing inflation coming down, people might start to feel that pound in their pocket, interest rates will start to come down also. And so you'll see in the next few months, and as the predictions that you were saying a second ago, Stephen, I think will allow the Chancellor to be able to say, we've got a plan, or the Conservatives have got a plan, we're sticking to it, inflation is coming down, and there is room for tax cuts, and we are going to have to spend a little bit less because of the way in which that we've had to overspend to deal with and to tackle the issues like COVID.
Are the issues on the doorstep, are the issues that are going out on the campaign trail the right ones? Because what's so interesting, especially in Wellingborough, hearing from Chris Hope earlier, it's actually on local issues. It's things like council spending in potholes that people are really bothered by. And I know that comes down to a local council, but people are looking for people to blame, aren't they? They're looking to their local MP.
Of course they are. And, what people care about is having a good, stable life, getting on with their lives, being able to afford the things that allow them to just crack on and do their day-to-day. And I think one of the things, when you strip out all of the politics, actually, I think what people are fed up of is just the instability. The truth is that most people don't want to, I do, Charlie does, but most people don't want to talk about politics all day, every day. Most people just want to crack on and, have a good life. And I think that's been made really, really difficult recently with the cost of living. So I'm not saying that if a Labour government come in, they will wave a magic wand and make everything perfect. In fact, I think they're going to inherit a very difficult situation. But there is clearly a feeling in the air, and I think, again, that's what these two by-elections results show, that there's a time for a change mood in the air.
Yeah, that's hard to get away from, Charlie, isn't it? Even for the most staunch Conservative, the idea that after 14 years, people just want to change.
It is, but then the question that I think the government and the Tory party and Rishi Sunak will want to put to the country is actually, is it now right to change? Because they've identified the priorities that the country wants. So it is the cost of living, it is stopping the small boats, it is about dealing with the backlog in the NHS, it is about growing the economy. So do you put all of that at risk? Do you vote for reform, which, as we've seen in the Kingswood by-election, allows Labour to come in and take you back to square one? I know that's a message that the Tories...
It is a bit... And Charlie, can I just...
So it is a question, actually, stick with us, stick with the plan, don't wreck all of the progress that's been made. Even though it has been a turbulent period, Rishi is the man to continue to grow the economy, to get inflation down, to deal with all of the things that he's identified. Put that at risk at your peril.
You've set out a series of problems that need to be fixed. The Conservatives have been in government for 14 years. If you're talking about the NHS backlog, I know people say COVID, you're talking about mass immigration.
And strikes. Doctors' strikes.
Let's just say on their own terms, this government are talking about... we're talking about a net migration of 700,000. We were talking about getting net migration down into the tens of thousands. It's now 700,000. Who has caused that? Who has been in power for all of this time? NHS, the economy being flat, inflation being high, tax burden being at a record high since the war. Who's presided over this?
Well, we've had 14 years of a Conservative government where, as we were talking about earlier on, from 2010 to 2015, it was a coalition government where the Tories were sort of held back by their Lib Dem counterparts. We then had a few years of Brexit referendum to get Brexit right, to get Brexit done, which is what the public wanted and which Boris Johnson delivered in 2019. We then had COVID, which is why the tax burden is so high. We have seen mass migration, not to the extent that we're seeing in mainland Europe, but that is a problem. I absolutely accept that, and so it's right to get those numbers down, but it's also right then to tackle illegal migration. And who is the one person, it seems to me, with a plan to tackle illegal migration that is trying to get the Rwanda policy through? That is Rishi Sunak, who's only been Prime Minister for couple of years, just over a year. So the public, and this is the Chancellor who took us through those difficult times, who took us through the economic crisis that, yes, might have been presided over another Prime Minister for 49 days, but the public will, I think, have moved on from that. And so it will be about Rishi Sunak and his record as Chancellor, dealing with the economy, protecting people's lives and livelihoods during COVID, and also leading this country through the turbulent challenges that it faces. It's addressing the priorities that the people want it to address.
Well, there you go. It's like a sort of party political... I feel like I'm at a game of tennis.
Yeah.
Very good. It's what we like, balancing it all out. Thank you very much, Lee. What matters, of course, ultimately, is what you think about it all. You know, when it comes to having our say in the general election, which is coming, I reckon, May. But we shall wait and see on that one.
I think November, so let's see, shall we? Andy, Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Let's get the weather now with Alex.